She was quiet in the barracks, always buried in manuals instead of muscle drills. They laughed, called her a scholar, not a soldier. But when the platoon was pinned down under heavy fire, and the CO went silent, she stood up and led them forward. The dog-eared field manual slipped from Corporal Elena Vasquez's fingers, landing with a soft thud on the worn wooden floor of the Afghanistan Forward Operating Base barracks. She barely glanced down at the Tactical Procedures Handbook that had occupied her attention for the past 3 hours, her dark eyes still focused on the complex diagrams of small unit tactics and urban warfare principles she had been memorizing. To anyone passing by her cramped corner of the shared living quarters at FOB Sentinel, she was just another soldier, studious, unremarkable, buried beneath stacks of military publications and training materials that most infantry personnel avoided like bureaucratic paperwork. The other soldiers called her Professor with barely concealed derision, because while they spent their downtime lifting weights, playing cards, or swapping war stories, Elena sat cross-legged on her narrow bunk, surrounded by tactical manuals, intelligence reports, and historical analyses of counterinsurgency operations. Officers walked past her study area without acknowledgement. Even the senior NCOs treated her like an oddity, necessary for maintaining unit education standards, but fundamentally unsuited for the real business of combat operations in hostile territory. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, subscribe for more untold tales of those who prove that strength comes in many forms. Elena Vasquez sat quietly in the corner of the Tactical Operations Center, her worn notebook balanced carefully on her knees as she transcribed information from classified intelligence briefings with the methodical precision of someone treating military service like an academic research project. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast sharp shadows across her face, highlighting features that suggested quiet intelligence rather than the hardened determination typically associated with combat veterans. To anyone observing the routine intelligence update session, she appeared to be exactly what her personnel file indicated: a communications specialist whose primary value lay in maintaining radio equipment and translating captured documents rather than engaging in direct combat operations. The briefing officer, Captain Martinez, barely acknowledged Elena's presence as he reviewed the day's intelligence updates with the assembled personnel, his attention focused entirely on the infantry squad leaders and senior NCOs who would be directly responsible for implementing tactical operations based on the information he was providing. Her role in these sessions was essentially clerical: take notes, maintain communication logs, and ensure that critical information was properly documented for higher headquarters review. Nothing about her suggested capability beyond basic administrative support and technical maintenance duties. Elena's notebook, however, contained far more than simple transcription of official briefings. Her meticulous handwriting filled page after page with tactical analysis, pattern recognition observations, enemy movement predictions, and strategic assessments that demonstrated understanding of military operations that went far beyond her official military occupational specialty. But these insights remained private, hidden within personal study materials that no one bothered to examine or value. Staff Sergeant Collins concluded the briefing session with routine assignments and patrol schedules, his tone suggesting the kind of mechanical efficiency that characterized daily operations at a remote combat outpost where routine had become the primary defense against constant underlying tension. Intelligence indicates continued enemy activity in Sector 7. Patrol schedules remain unchanged. Communications will be maintained through standard frequencies. Any questions? Elena raised her hand with characteristic hesitation, her voice quiet, but carrying an undertone of analytical certainty that most personnel either missed entirely or dismissed as academic theorizing unsuited to practical military realities. Sergeant, the enemy movement patterns suggest they're establishing a coordinated ambush site approximately 2 kilometers north of checkpoint. Bravo. The timing and positioning indicate probable attack within the next 6 to 8 hours. Collins looked at her with barely concealed irritation, his expression suggesting annoyance at having routine briefings interrupted by theoretical speculation from someone whose combat experience consisted primarily of radio maintenance and document translation. Corporal, your job is communication support, not tactical analysis. Leave operational planning to personnel with appropriate training and experience. Elena nodded once and returned to her note-taking, but her pen continued moving across the pages, documenting tactical observations and strategic assessments that she had learned to keep private rather than risk further dismissal from personnel who viewed her intellectual approach to military service as evidence of unsuitability for real combat operations. After the briefing session ended and personnel dispersed to their various duties, Elena remained in the Tactical Operations Center, ostensibly to perform routine maintenance on communication equipment, but actually to continue her private analysis of intelligence patterns and tactical developments that seemed to escape the attention of senior leadership focused on immediate operational requirements rather than strategic planning. Private Jackson, one of the younger soldiers assigned to her communications section, approached with obvious curiosity about Elena's continuous study habits and comprehensive knowledge of military tactics that seemed to exceed her official duties and training background. "Corporal, why do you spend so much time studying those manuals? Half the guys think you're trying to get promoted to officer candidate school or something." Elena's response reflected the careful balance she maintained between sharing knowledge and avoiding attention that might result in unwanted scrutiny of her background or capabilities. "Knowledge saves lives, Jackson. The more you understand about how military operations work, the better equipped you are to survive when things go wrong. But your communications, not infantry," Jackson pointed out with the logic of someone who understood military organization in terms of rigid occupational specialties and clearly defined roles rather than integrated capabilities that might transcend traditional boundaries. Elena looked up from the radio equipment she was allegedly maintaining, her eyes reflecting depths of experience and understanding that seemed inconsistent with her official military record and current assignment. In combat, Jackson, everyone eventually becomes infantry. Understanding tactics isn't just helpful, it's essential for survival. The conversation was interrupted when the base alarm system activated with urgent electronic tones that instantly transformed the routine afternoon into a high-priority emergency situation requiring immediate response from all available personnel. The public address system crackled with tension as the base commander's voice carried across every building and position within the fortified perimeter. "All personnel, code red alert. Multiple casualties at Checkpoint Bravo. Immediate QRF response required. Enemy contact ongoing with heavy weapons fire." Elena was on her feet before the announcement finished, her notebook forgotten as years of suppressed training and tactical instincts surged back to immediate readiness. Jackson stared at her transformation from quiet academic to focused military professional, the change dramatic enough to be clearly visible even to someone with limited combat experience. "What do we do, Corporal?" Jackson asked, his voice reflecting the uncertainty of someone whose training had prepared him for equipment maintenance rather than emergency combat response to friendly forces under attack. Elena was already moving toward the armory with purposeful efficiency that suggested extensive familiarity with crisis response procedures, her academic demeanor completely replaced by something much harder and more tactically oriented. "We grab our gear and get ready to move. That attack is happening exactly where I predicted it would, which means our people are walking into a coordinated ambush with insufficient intelligence and inadequate tactical preparation." Within minutes, the base's quick reaction force had assembled in the motor pool area, 30 soldiers preparing for emergency deployment to relieve the checkpoint that had come under heavy enemy fire. Lieutenant Morrison, the platoon leader, conducted a hasty briefing based on fragmentary reports from the besieged position, his information limited and tactical situation unclear due to communication difficulties and ongoing combat that prevented detailed assessment. "Current intelligence is limited," Morrison explained to the assembled soldiers, his voice carrying the controlled tension of someone preparing to lead personnel into combat with insufficient information about enemy strength, positioning, or tactical capabilities. "Checkpoint Bravo came under attack approximately 15 minutes ago. We have multiple casualties and communication is intermittent. Our mission is immediate relief and casualty evacuation." Elena raised her hand again, her voice carrying more authority than anyone had previously heard from the quiet communications specialist who spent most of her time studying rather than participating in tactical training exercises. "Lieutenant, Based on intelligence patterns I've been tracking, this is likely a complex ambush designed to draw our relief force into a predetermined kill zone. The enemy has been positioning for this attack for at least 72 hours. Morrison looked at her with obvious skepticism, his expression reflecting doubt about accepting tactical advice from someone whose combat experience was officially limited to radio maintenance and administrative duties. Corporal, I appreciate your concerns, but we have soldiers under fire who need immediate assistance. We don't have time for theoretical analysis. Elena's response was measured but firm, her tone suggesting confidence in analysis that had been dismissed too many times to ignore when lives were at stake. Sir, with respect, this isn't theoretical. I've been documenting enemy patterns that indicate coordinated preparation for exactly this type of attack. They're expecting us to respond along the main approach route, where they've positioned heavy weapons and improvised explosive devices. Then what do you suggest, Corporal? Morrison asked, his question carrying more curiosity than genuine interest in her tactical recommendations. Elena moved to the tactical map mounted on the wall of the motor pool office, her finger tracing alternative routes that avoided obvious ambush positions while providing tactical advantages for approaching the besieged checkpoint. Her knowledge of terrain and enemy capabilities was comprehensive and detailed, suggesting familiarity with tactical planning that exceeded her official training and experience. There's an alternate approach through Sector 9 that allows us to flank their primary positions while avoiding the kill zone they've established along the main route. It's more difficult terrain, but it provides tactical surprise and reduces our exposure to their heavy weapons. Morrison studied the route Elena had indicated, his assessment revealing growing recognition that her tactical analysis might have more value than her communications specialist designation had suggested. How do you know this terrain well enough to plan alternate routes? Elena's carefully maintained cover story began showing stress fractures under the pressure of operational necessity and tactical reality that required honest assessment of capabilities rather than maintaining comfortable fiction about her background and qualifications. I've studied every available intelligence report and satellite image of this area for the past 6 months, Lieutenant. Pattern analysis is part of effective communications support. Before Morrison could respond further, the radio crackled with urgent transmission from Checkpoint Bravo, the voice of Sergeant Williams carrying barely controlled desperation as his tactical situation continued deteriorating under sustained enemy fire. Any unit, this is Bravo 7. We are taking heavy casualties and running low on ammunition. Estimate squad strength enemy force with heavy weapons positioned in coordinated firing positions. Request immediate assistance before we are completely overrun. Morrison made his decision with the kind of rapid tactical assessment that combat leadership required when friendly forces were under attack and time was running out for effective intervention. Corporal Vasquez, you're coming with us as communications specialist. If your route analysis is accurate, we'll use your alternate approach. Elena's transformation was immediate and complete. The quiet academic who had spent months being dismissed as unsuitable for combat operations was replaced by someone whose tactical competence and leadership presence had been hidden beneath careful camouflage of intellectual pursuits and administrative duties. Roger, Lieutenant. I'll need access to the tactical radio and authorization to coordinate fire support if we encounter enemy positions along the route. Morrison's surprise at Elena's professional confidence and tactical terminology was obvious, but operational urgency prevented detailed questioning of her apparent expertise in areas outside her official military specialty. Granted, let's move. The convoy of 3 armored vehicles departed FOB Sentinel 15 minutes later, following Elena's recommended route through terrain that most personnel would have considered too difficult for rapid tactical movement under combat conditions. Her navigation was precise and confident, directing the convoy through positions that avoided known enemy observation points while maintaining tactical flexibility for responding to unexpected contact. As they approached the area where Checkpoint Bravo was under attack, the sound of sustained automatic weapons fire and periodic explosions confirmed that the battle was still ongoing and that friendly forces were still holding their position despite overwhelming enemy pressure and mounting casualties. Elena's voice came across the tactical radio with calm authority that seemed completely inconsistent with her previous role as quiet communications support. All vehicles. Enemy positions are approximately 200 meters northeast of the checkpoint, positioned along the ridgeline with interlocking fields of fire covering all conventional approach routes. We need to establish flanking positions before attempting direct assault. Morrison's response reflected growing recognition that Elena's tactical analysis had been accurate and that her recommended approach had successfully avoided the ambush that would have devastated a conventional relief force using standard tactics. Vasquez, how do you know enemy positions with that level of detail? Elena's answer came while she was simultaneously coordinating with higher headquarters for additional fire support and organizing the tactical deployment of the relief force with precision that suggested extensive experience in combat leadership roles. Lieutenant, I've been tracking enemy patrol patterns and analyzing their tactical preferences for months. This ambush site represents their standard operating procedures for engaging coalition forces. The tactical situation at Checkpoint Bravo was desperate when the relief force arrived. Sergeant Williams and his remaining soldiers were pinned down behind inadequate cover, taking casualties from accurate enemy fire while running critically low on ammunition and medical supplies needed to treat wounded personnel. Elena assessed the tactical situation with the kind of rapid analysis that comes from extensive combat experience, identifying enemy positions, friendly casualties, and tactical opportunities for breaking the enemy's coordinated attack, while minimizing additional casualties to coalition forces. Lieutenant, we need immediate suppressing fire on the ridgeline positions while 2nd Squad flanks left to establish enfilade fire on their primary machine gun position. 1st Squad can then assault through the center while the enemy is focused on the flanking movement. Morrison stared at Elena with growing amazement, finally understanding that the quiet communications specialist who had been dismissed as too academic for combat operations was actually demonstrating tactical leadership capabilities that exceeded his own training and experience. Corporal, where did you learn small unit tactics at this level? Elena's carefully constructed cover identity was collapsing under operational pressure that required honest assessment of her capabilities rather than continued pretense about her background and qualifications. Previous assignment, sir. I can explain later, but right now we have soldiers who need immediate assistance. The assault Elena coordinated was textbook perfect. Her tactical plan successfully flanked the enemy positions while providing effective fire support for the pinned-down checkpoint personnel, breaking the enemy's coordinated attack and forcing their withdrawal from positions they had spent days preparing for the ambush operation. Sergeant Williams approached Elena after the successful relief operation, his expression reflecting amazement at the tactical competence demonstrated by someone he had previously known only as quiet communications support with academic interests rather than combat capabilities. Corporal, that was some of the best small unit leadership I've seen in 3 deployments. Where did you learn to coordinate tactical operations like that? Elena's response was carefully measured, understanding that her cover story was no longer sustainable, but still needing to maintain operational security about classified aspects of her background and previous assignments. Rangers, Sergeant. I was 75th Ranger Regiment before transferring to communications. Morrison's understanding of Elena's tactical expertise suddenly made complete sense, but he was still struggling to comprehend why someone with Ranger qualifications and combat leadership experience would accept assignment as basic communications support at a remote forward operating base. Why would you transfer from Rangers to communications, Corporal? That's usually considered a step backward in terms of career progression and operational significance. Elena's gaze became distant, her eyes focusing on something far beyond the immediate tactical situation as she processed memories and experiences that had influenced her decision to hide exceptional qualifications beneath ordinary military assignments. Because some operations change you in ways that make normal military career progression less important than finding ways to continue serving without constantly being reminded of things you'd rather forget, Lieutenant. Because sometimes the best way to help is to disappear until someone desperately needs you to remember who you used to be. Morrison absorbed her explanation with the understanding of someone who had made similar difficult choices during his own military career, recognizing the psychological complexity that often characterized personnel with extensive combat experience in classified operations. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes arrived at Checkpoint Bravo 6 hours later to conduct after-action assessment, and determine how a routine enemy attack had been successfully defeated with minimal coalition casualties despite initial tactical disadvantage and overwhelming enemy numbers. The tactical coordination that broke this ambush was exceptional, Hayes told Morrison during his operational debrief. Your flanking maneuver and fire coordination prevented what could have been a significant tactical defeat and heavy casualties. Morrison's response demonstrated appropriate military courtesy while ensuring that credit for tactical success was properly attributed to the personnel responsible for mission accomplishment. Sir, Corporal Vasquez planned and coordinated the entire tactical response. Her analysis of enemy positions and recommended approach routes made the successful operation possible. Hayes looked at Elena with obvious interest, reviewing her personnel file on his tablet computer while trying to reconcile her official communications specialist designation with the tactical leadership capabilities that had been demonstrated during the emergency response operation. Corporal Vasquez, your tactical performance today was outstanding. I'm recommending you for immediate promotion and transfer to a position that better utilizes your apparent capabilities and experience. Elena's response reflected the careful balance she had maintained between accepting recognition for professional competence while avoiding attention that might compromise her preference for remaining anonymous within routine military assignments. Thank you, sir, but I'm satisfied with my current assignment and responsibilities. Hayes was clearly puzzled by Elena's lack of interest in career advancement that most military personnel would consider highly desirable, especially given her demonstrated qualifications for positions requiring greater responsibility and leadership authority. Corporal, most soldiers with your tactical capabilities would be eager for advancement to positions offering greater challenge and responsibility. Why would you prefer to remain in communications? Elena's answer provided insight into the psychological complexities that often affected personnel with extensive combat experience in classified operations, particularly those who had been forced to make difficult decisions under extreme stress that continued to affect their approach to military service. Because knowledge and capability serve their purpose regardless of official recognition, sir. Because sometimes the most valuable contribution you can make is being prepared when someone needs help, even if that means remaining invisible until the critical moment arrives. Hayes accepted her explanation with the understanding of a senior officer who had encountered similar situations with highly qualified personnel whose personal circumstances made conventional career progression less appealing than finding ways to serve effectively while maintaining preferred levels of privacy and autonomy. 2 weeks later, Elena returned to her corner of the barracks and her routine of studying tactical manuals and intelligence reports, officially remaining communications specialist despite having demonstrated combat leadership capabilities that exceeded most infantry officers. But something had changed in how other soldiers viewed her academic pursuits and comprehensive knowledge of military operations. Professor, Private Jackson said, approaching her study area with obvious respect rather than the previous casual dismissiveness. Could you help me understand this urban warfare manual? I'm having trouble with the tactical movement principles. Elena looked up from her current reading material, an advanced analysis of counterinsurgency operations that few military personnel would attempt to understand without specialized training, and smiled with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose expertise was finally being recognized and valued. Of course, Jackson. Understanding these principles could save your life someday. As she began explaining complex tactical concepts with the patient expertise of someone who had applied theoretical knowledge in real combat situations, Elena realized that her period of enforced anonymity had served its purpose. She had successfully hidden exceptional qualifications until the moment when those capabilities were desperately needed, proving that sometimes the most effective way to serve is to remain invisible until circumstances require extraordinary competence. The dog-eared tactical manual lay open on her bunk, its pages filled with handwritten notes and analysis that demonstrated depths of military knowledge that most personnel never suspected existed within the quiet communications specialist who preferred studying to physical training. But those who had witnessed her tactical leadership during the Checkpoint Bravo engagement understood that some soldiers serve most effectively when their true capabilities remain hidden until the critical moment when lives depend on exceptional competence emerging from unexpected sources. Elena Vasquez had proven that intellectual pursuit and combat effectiveness were not mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the most dangerous assumptions are those made about personnel whose apparent limitations conceal extraordinary qualifications waiting for the moment when they would be needed most.